Raijintek Scylla Elite is a custom cooling kit in a box, and the CA360 part tells you that this particular kit includes a 360mm copper radiator. You can alternatively buy a 240mm version. There's also, slightly confusingly, as opposed to this Elite kit, a Pro kit. The Pro kit has a D5 pump on the reservoir and hard tube plus hard tube fittings. This Elite kit has soft tube, therefore soft tube fittings, and a DDC pump on the reservoir. You can argue till the cows come home about whether Pro and Elite which has the higher status, but to me Elite sounds like it should be top notch, and yet in this context Pro clearly sits above Elite. Let's administer an unboxing and see what you get for your money. 3-pack of fans, soft tubing, squeezy fill bottle. There's the pump res, fittings, CPU block, 2 bottles of coolant, 500ml each, so 1 litre in total, and the radiator. Have to say, they do have some slightly extraordinary names, these components. For example, the coolant, Raaqua. So Raijintek meets Aqua, Raaqua. Okay. Clear plastic tubing. They can't do anything with that, can they? Raitubo. You're getting the idea now. These fittings don't seem to have a name, they're just fittings. Then we have the CPU block. This happens to be the Forkis Elite, but it might alternatively in a different kit be the Forkis Pro RBW. You'd think it'd be RGB, but RBW. However, this is the Forkis Elite. So no RGB. The 3 fans, EOS 12 RBW, add 3, it's a 3-pack, again with the RBW. Pump reservoir, Antilla DDC Evo RBW. So DDC rather than D5, that's all fine. Let's have a brief look at that. A much more substantial piece of hardware than I expected. It's kind of watercool.de-esque, so that frame there is aluminium by the feel of it, and the top as well, I'd imagine. That feels like it's acetal, and then we've got a mounting bracket. I did not expect this to fit. Why isn't it standing upright? Oh, I see. It's because we've got screws at the back on slots. Right, let's just sort that. That's about right. When I say the Antilla unit is immediately familiar to me, here is a water-cooled heat killer unit. It's a D5. It has an LED strip inside this piece of the frame there, which illuminates the glass reservoir. That's also glass, I think. Well, we shall see. And also has an LED strip there. So yes, I wonder where they got their inspiration from. And finally we have the Calore Elite CA360 radiator. It's copper, Calore suggests calories, which are units of energy, so that's legit. Oh, okay, I've never seen that before. 3 rubber grommets, so when you attach fans to the radiator, you don't get direct plastic to metal contact. That might be quite a neat idea, actually. A radiator, it's slightly slimmer than the norm because it's 27mm rather than 30. Fitting screws, that's your lot. So all the hardware is pretty much what you'd expect to see, albeit with little tweaks here and there. However, when I look at a packaged custom loop cooling kit, I'm immediately driven to think of the EKWB Classic lineup. which I reviewed a while ago now. It's simply all the bits you expect in a box for slightly cheap. The snag is that this kit is more expensive than a comparable EK kit. So Raijintek is charging a premium, something like €30 dollars pounds, which rather suggests they're feeling confident in their hardware. I need a case that's going to accommodate all the Raijintek hardware, and I've decided to use the Fractal design Torrent. And I'm going to mount the 360mm radiator at the front. But wait, you say, isn't it true we have 180mm fans at the front of the case at the moment? Yes, absolutely true. And this will give me the opportunity to try out the accessory brackets that Fractal provides for that very purpose. Before I pull off the panels and remove the front fans and swap in these replacement brackets, a quick note: if you're absolutely eagle-eyed and have a decent memory, you may remember in my Fractal Design Torrent second look, when I put the D15 on, I had this fan in this position here. I've moved it to the front just to confirm it does indeed clear tall memory if I move the fan to the high position, and yes, you can indeed put the glass on with reasonably tall memory in position. Enough of this, let's take off the panel and have these fans out. One, two. Out with the brackets that retain the 180mm fans. That's the top and the bottom. The brackets that hold the 180 fans that come out are quite clearly different to each other. The ones going in are symmetrical. Interestingly, these tags can fit in either of these notches. So for a 140 configuration, we put them in like so, and for 120, move them in closer to the center. Just like that. Installing the fans actually more awkward than I expected. The frames end up touching each other. I found the only way I could actually do the job was by putting the center fan in place and then installing the outside fans. Anywho, they are in place, so that's something. The rad and the unions are also ready to go. Next job is to remove the Noctua cooler and install the Raijintek CPU block. And the point, of course, is that we're replacing this hefty grey air cooler with this tiddly little water block. But of course the block is not doing the cooling. It's the rad and the airflow doing the cooling. Appeal. Oh, certainly a very shiny surface. I'm not seeing any warping in the reflections, so I guess it's flat. Arctic MX5. There we go. Plastic washer, spring, screw. Just need to get all the fasteners engaged before we tighten them down. Aesthetically, that block fits in with the Asus Tough Gaming, the G-Skill and the Sabrent Rocket absolutely perfectly. Installing the CPU block in this AM4 system is dead straightforward. The instructions are reasonably clear, although they could do with being slightly larger in print, and also using color coding wouldn't be a bad thing. AM4 can be a little bit tricky when it comes to CPU cooler installation. This is absolutely fine. It certainly would be easier with the board flat on the bench, of that I have absolutely no doubt. Also, judging by the instructions and past experience, Intel LGA 115X and LGA 1200X, no problem whatsoever. When it came to the pump reservoir, it's a slightly different story. As you can see, I have the rad installed with the unions at the bottom. If I had them at the top, that would work in this case because there's just about enough space either way, but functionally it seems to me better with the unions at the bottom. Mounting the pump reservoir This is an unusual case. We have fans at the bottom, so we don't have a power supply shroud. There's no option for mounting the bracketry on the power supply shroud. Not that that would be a great way to go. Anyway, I've used the alternate hardware supplied by Raijintek to install the pump reservoir on the radiator. As you can see, it's absolutely fine where it is, although it does look a tad peculiar raised up from the floor of the case. I also think it would help the loop if I had a liquid-cooled graphics card. Obviously this kit doesn't include a graphics block, and then I was to feed in the bottom of the block out the top and go to the CPU from there. As things stand, this loop will work, but I'm going to end up with a soft tube feeding from here all the way up to the CPU block. It's not going to look brilliant, but it will work, and that's the most important thing of all. One thing that has caused me some annoyance is that Raijintek supplies 6 straight unions. You don't get any angled or right-angled adapters, and in this installation I've required some to give myself a chance of connecting the tubes without kinking. The next step is the Raitubo. Soft tube installed. It is worth pointing out you don't get any form of cutters with this kit. I have some proper tube cutters which work very well on this thick wall tubing. At a push you could use regular scissors, but I find these work better. Also, you don't get one of these jumper blocks in the kit, which means you either have to fill the reservoir, turn everything on and pray, or you can disconnect the main power connector, use a jumper block and then run the cooling system separate to the PC first. Of course, in the ideal world, use a proper pressure tester to make sure the system's not leaking before you turn it on and potentially spray coolant everywhere. Around the back we have the Raijintek fan and RGB hub. Supplied is a remote control. I've connected the hub to the motherboard, so the ARGB lighting should be controlled by motherboard software. My guess is going to be when I turn it on it'll be an RGB marquee, and I need to press one of these buttons in order to switch it over to ARGB mode. Don't know that for sure, but that's my guess. Caution, you see, caution in everything. Okay, we're now ready for liquid. Well, that's me wrong. In actual fact, the Asus software is automatically controlling the lighting. So we're on a color cycle, and now we're on static red. So the system appears to be working perfectly right out of the box. That's the thermal testing done, and the results are better than I expected. Now then, ambient temperature at the moment, yep, that's 28.8 degrees C. While I was testing, it was just about 28. So the temperatures in the chart you're about to see are delta temperatures. I'm spelling that out because occasionally this causes confusion. So my setup is similar to the setup when I used the Noctua D15 in the Fractal Torrent. However, don't forget I've removed the stock 180 fans on the front and I've replaced it with the Raijintek fans. So it's not just a switch from Noctua to Raijintek, it's also a change in the case fans at the front. Quite significant changes. Nonetheless, the results are impressive. The temperatures I actually read were 77 degrees Celsius for both CPU and GPU, and you can see what this means in terms of delta, and more importantly, how it compares to my previous tests with this graphics card and with the Noctua on this processor. Temperature for the processor does not change. Temperature for the graphics in this configuration drops significantly, which suggests that the cooling at the front of the case, those 3120s from Raijintek, are doing a decent job. My pros and cons of the Raijintek Scylla Elite CA360 kit. Pros first, the good stuff. Effective CPU cooling. Undeniably so. The quality of the CPU block, the reservoir, pump housing, all feels like good stuff. Obviously this is not in any sense testing of longevity, it's just a how it feels, do parts go together well, that kind of gut reaction, and it's positive. The ARGB lighting, I like it. I've seen better on occasion, but this is perfectly effective, works well enough. And during the course of this review, I've been back to Raijintek and asked about this RBW, and essentially it's taking 3 letters out of the word rainbow. rainbow, if you see what they mean, which personally I think is silly, because we've got the old 12 volt RGB and we've got this 5 volt ARGB, and all you have to say is ARGB. You haven't got to make up your own 3-letter acronym, so RBW, nonsense. ARGB, yep, thumbs up for that. Noise levels during testing were perfectly acceptable. I don't know what speed the 3 fans at the front of the case were running at, because the combination of the fan hub, the Asus motherboard and HW info, between them they didn't report fan speeds. The fans themselves are rated at 800 to 1800. I'd be quite surprised they weren't running at least close to flat out. I'd be amazed if they weren't running north of 1500. Noise levels were absolutely fine. Cons, the negatives. So you don't get any angled fittings, which I think is a bit silly. A couple of 90s I think will make a lot of difference. The odds, in my opinion, you'll be able to use this kit and just install it in your case without needing any extra parts, I think is low. Similarly, I found the pump reservoir mounts to be restrictive. Having said that, I've used Raijintek hardware, but I only had the one choice. I can't rotate the pump reservoir 90 degrees. The unions have to come this way. I've got no say in the matter. This is how I've ended up, and that makes life a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. You don't get a jumper for your power supply included, which is they cost pennies. It's helpful, that's all I'm going to say. And finally, the price looks a bit steep. As I say, comparing it to the EKWB Classic kit, this looks expensive. One point I want to wrap up on, the name Raijintek Scylla Elite CA360. If Raijintek instead had called this kit the Raijintek Scylla Gamer, that would work for me. Elite, it just seems a little bit off, but the hardware is fine.